Welcome to Military Mutual, where we ensure the benefits of service for our military veterans, their families, and our businesses. I'm your host, Derek Barksdale, and today we have an exceptional guest, a true leader in the veteran community, retired Master Chief Maurice Wilson from NVTSI and Reboot. Maurice, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm on a scale of 1 to 10, Derek. I'm doing a absolute 10, and I'm glad to be here, my friend. Mhm,
Absolutely love it. You're always a
mhm,
motivational force for so many of us. And, for
mhm,
those of the people who are on our show listening, might not know you, might not be
mhm.
familiar with your background, and it's so huge. Could you share a little bit about the experience of you as a Master Chief and then also your role as you transition to NVTSI?
Well, how much time do we have, Derek?
It's only about a 35-minute show, but,
Oh, okay.
give us some cliff notes.
In 1 minute or less. Well, hey, thank you for the opportunity to meet your audience and share a little bit about me. Retired Navy, retired in 1998. Um, Hospital corpsman here in San Diego. Since retiring, I've been working in the community. First for the Urban League of San Diego here for about 10 years. And then in 2009, myself and retired Admiral Froman started the National Veterans Transition Services, also called Reboot, to really tackle some of the pressing challenges facing our transition service members and veterans. We developed and created a unique and still unique program called the Reboot Workshop, which essentially stands for Reverse Boot Camp. And I'll stop there and answer more questions later.
Oh, no, that's absolutely perfect. The fact that you're giving back to the community, that is just you in itself. I mean,
Mhm.
whenever anyone mentions Maurice Wilson, it's always about giving back to the community and more importantly, transitioning. And we're going to talk about this thing called reintegration, which is relatively a new concept. But, in the end, you know more than anyone on how transitioning from military is significant and how it could be life changing. Could you shed some light on really the key challenges that veterans face during those transitions and how you, NVTSI, Reboot, can assist them in overcoming these challenges?
Absolutely. Well, for me, reintegration is almost an old subject. I mean, it might be new for others, but we've been studying this now for about 14 years. And we looked at all of the data that related to transition and then reintegration. And our obvious conclusion is that when it comes to the process of getting out, there's a lot of energy, resources, and money put into transitioning out, but very little put into reintegrating in, which is the bigger load, which is the bigger side. And so we're on a national initiative to really re-educate America about transition, but reintegration, because you always have to ask yourself a question: what's beyond transition? And what's beyond transition is your entire life. So that's a bigger process, requires a lot more in-depth support. And so over the years, we've developed systems and processes, built relationships, and are now working with national and regional partners to promote what we call a veteran reintegration policy. And go figure that. Here we are in 2023. Roughly everybody's been in the transitions business for years, and we're just now talking about a veteran reintegration policy.
Amazing, isn't it? I mean, I went through TAP myself, the TAP program. I went to the Rulins course. I went through a lot of different things. And, you and I have had many discussions on how it's like you're drinking through a fire hose. It's usually the last few months of your transition out of the military. And that really is what transitioning is. It's really, your transition from out of the military and you're getting ready for that transition. But reintegration reintegrates you back into the civilian population. And they're two really kind of different things, preparing to get out. And then once you're out, how you're reintegrating into the system. So, you talked about how you've been doing this for pretty much years. A lot of times we didn't put a term behind it or whatnot. And what I found that, there's been a major disconnect between, the transition and the new focus on reintegration into that civilian life, and that it's a multifaceted process and something that, sometimes you can't put a name on it, but it exists out there and there's voids that are there. How did reintegration start becoming the focus? And what are some of the main nuances that veterans might encounter on the reintegration side? Because a lot of talk is always about that transition, but when you go to
Mhm,
the reintegration in the civilian side, what are those
mhm.
things and those nuances that the veteran might encounter?
Well, the big nuance, and then again, this is everything that I share with you is going to be backed by research, and so we try
Sure.
to go beyond just our opinions, but actually look at the hard evidence-based data that's been collected over years. And so in a nutshell, when you join the military, you are programmed for military service. And you and I've talked about this before,
Yeah.
which requires the changing of what we call your locus of control. In other words, the management of your life, your overall life, is really kind of handed over to the military, rightfully so, to be part of the process or the system. However, when we leave, and here's the nuance, when we leave the military, we have to subconsciously reassume that control of our life and going from externally driven to internally driven. And then we
Mm,
have to do three distinct things. Now we got to do a lot of things, but just to kind of keep it simple and easy, the three major things that we have to do: number one, we have to create a new identity. Number two, we have to find our new purpose. And number three, we have to define our next career. Now, when you
mm,
think about coming in the military, everyone who's gone through the process, instantly the military gives you those three things. You get a new identity, you get a mission, and you get a career. And albeit the career is not necessarily by your own choosing, it's really at the needs of the military, but that's really the covenant, that's the arrangement. However, leaving the military, and again, a big report just came out last month that identified, which is years of research, that identified the biggest challenge that individuals are facing that's really promoting, let's say, or predisposing them to suicide stress is loss of purpose, not having a mission. And
yeah.
we can go on when it comes to finding the job right now of, let's say, and I read a report last week from McKinsey and Company of 150,000 veterans that got out and got jobs. 90,500 were working below the level of pay they were working while they're in the military.
Wow.
So when you look at that and you start asking the question, okay, why is that? Especially where right now, currently, veteran unemployment is at a very low 2.9%. The national average is 3.8. So we're doing much better there. However, when you dig into the details, how they say when you disaggregate the data, you find that 61% of our veterans are underemployed. And so the question is, why? What's going on with that?
Yeah.
I'll pause for a second, let you ask some questions, and then I'll give you the answer to the why.
I love it. There is so much that you packed into what 3 minutes that you just talked about. And, it started with programming. We're programmed when we come into the military, and it starts from boot camp. And, a lot of
Mhm,
people say, oh, people get brainwashed in boot camp, but relatively it is kind of that way. We get programmed. And, when we come out, we almost have to be reprogrammed, like you said. And that's where, like,
mhm,
reboot, the name kind of came from, because we have to reprogram our minds. We have to kind of almost wipe the hard drive clear and rebuild. Now, there's so many great things that we've learned while we've been in the military that are tangible, to us
mhm,
growing and serving for a better purpose. And I think
mhm,
that that's the thing that we can't wipe away. No matter what we do with that hard drive, our sense of purpose grows so much while we're actually in the military, because we're serving for a bigger purpose than ourselves. Anyone who joins the military, a lot of times, hey, I need something to do. But once you're in, especially after that first tour, it's all about serving for a bigger purpose than ourselves and so forth. And so you can't really ever get rid of that. That is ingrained in the hard drive. It can't be wiped away, but we do have to reprogram some of the things. And when you're talking about the suicides that are there because of the fact that there's a lack of purpose in their lives, how are they planning on tackling that, and what is your organization really doing to really help in that aspect? Because I mean, life is so critical, and to see 22 deaths, going on per day, by our military, it's just critical. And to see that, hey, we're kind of figuring this out, and what you're doing at NVTSI and in the transition and reintegration world is going to be a big thing. So, what's going on there, and what can we do to help?
So again, you packed a lot into that question. So let me try to unpack that one. So again, there's a lot going on with that. Let's start with first and foremost, you're spot on. When we go through the military programming process, we have to be configured and programmed for military service, and that's a very proactive kind of process. You go through boot camp, and during boot camp, you over time, anywhere from 8 to 13 weeks, you adapt and adjust to the new environment. You learn new habits, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations. All of these things are internally embedded within our subconscious mind. And so you don't see it, feel it, but you know it's happening and you're part of the club. Now, leaving the military, and again, let's always kind of go back to square one, that belongs to the military. When you leave and take off the uniform, what you're leaving behind the mission, excuse me, the
Mhm.
identity. You're leaving behind the mission, the purpose, and you're leaving behind the career. 86% of most transitioning service members do not want to do the same thing in the civilian life that they did in the military.
Yep.
But when you ask that same group, okay, what is it that you want to do? They can't tell you. You get I'm undecided. I haven't figured it out yet. And so that's where the problem comes on. So now let's kind of go back to the next question where, okay, well, who's responsible for what? And we've had many discussions about who's responsible. So, and again, first you got to, before you can take responsibility for anything, you have to know the what. What are you really trying to do? Is it just to get a job where, okay, we've been doing that for years. Let's just say for the last 20 years, we've been pursuing the job. But overall and fundamentally, that's not working if you look at the data where we see that, okay, we have this huge underemployment scenario. So there has to be a different approach. And then the question, as you brought up, well, who's responsible? And so fundamentally, automatically the individual. But the problem is, again, the individual doesn't know how. That's a changing your mindset is a process that you have to go through something. Somebody has to show you how. You can't just take off the uniform and instantaneously, I'm a civilian. It really doesn't work like that.
No,
I mean,
not at
that's
all.
that's a that's a nice simplification, but the reality is you have to change, and it's sort of like relearning new habits. And Derek, you're spot on. You can't wipe the hard drive clean. That's not how life works. So you have to rewrite the program, but in order to rewrite the program, you have to go through a process to redefine who and what you want to become when you get out. And so what you have to do, and I'm speaking to your audience out there, the three things that you have to do is you have to create a new identity. You have to do it. You have to define your new purpose, and then you have to define what the next career is. That's on you. But most people don't know how. So that's where the disconnect is. We all get out, but we don't understand, don't know that process. Hence, that's why we developed the Reboot Workshop, which is the only reverse boot camp that uses science and is very evidence based that helps you with that process.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing there. I've had an opportunity to sit on some of those classes, and just the way that you're coming from a new perspective on education. And my degree's in workforce education development. I just have this passion to really educate veterans, their family members specifically. And going back to your original thing, I was fortunate enough that when I was transitioning out of the military, the whole reason why I was getting out and I retired, I had this 5-year plan that, I had a great mentor of mine who told me I needed to have as I started to get out. And mine started around real estate. I knew that when I got out, I wanted to be in real estate. I wanted to, change the way veterans are served through real estate in some capacity. But I'm not going to lie, when I got out, I was a little concerned with not having that steady paycheck. So I found myself getting into what I had done all these years because I knew, hey, I can get a paycheck. I knew it. There wasn't a question about it. And so I got into government service. I was deputy chief of police in Navy Region Southwest. It was everyone else's dream job. But for me, it just didn't really hit the mark. Success is getting what you want. Fulfillment is getting what you're made for. And although I was great in law enforcement, I really enjoyed it. It really wasn't my passion. And so I was fortunate enough to understand my passion through,
Mhm.
changing the way veterans are served in real estate. And so that worked for me. But a lot of other people don't know that yet, especially those that may be getting out after 4 years. They're still figuring
Mhm.
life out in itself. And so,
Hmm.
what I really feel, and going back to my original point, is that education is the thing that bridges that gap. And you've already made some milestones in how, changing education from, how you're teaching people, kind of the reboot process is really developed. And, I'm fortunate enough and I'm really thrilled that, our company, Military Mutual, we're developing a personal and professional on demand platform for veterans, their families, and even
Hmm.
business owners for veteran owned businesses. And I think that the way that education has been before, where people sit down for 2 weeks and kind of learn in this regimented process, is old and it's archaic. And there's a point for it, there's a place for it. Don't get me wrong, where they have to have that. But there's ways that I think that we can learn in snippets of information. It's a proven fact that people who have an attention time frame nowadays is much shorter than it was 20, 30 years ago. Right now we're literally 9 to 11 minutes in attention time frame. So the goal for me is really to provide some on-demand aspects of personal and professional development that they can learn. You've already started it where they're getting into a classroom and they're not getting the old way of just regimented training that's shoved down their throat. It's now a concept where they interact with one another. They're thinking, they're talking through different challenges. I mean, people are crying in your classes because they have to
Hmm.
resurface some things that that
Hmm.
they've suppressed for many years. So,
Hmm.
can you explain to us, maybe the different ways that you're trying to come across on the
Hmm.
education aspect and reintegration,
Hmm.
particularly, that you think is going to make a good wave for the future and how our veterans
Hmm.
can be better prepared as they transition out and reintegrate?
Well, great. Another really good question. And so what we've learned and what we've been studying is the process of learning. And the process that, first and foremost, we always have to go back to anatomy and physiology. Anatomically, we haven't changed. The human body, hasn't evolved or changed in quite some time. And so, however we were learning, let's say 500 years ago, we're still learning. Our body is still designed to learn that same way. Although the amount of information, though, is now hitting us rapidly. There's a thing called Moore's Law. And Moore's Law, Moore, he created the computer chip, and his algorithm was the computer chip is its processing capability is going to double every 6 years, excuse me, every 6 months, and it'll be an exponential curve of rapid processing. That's technology and that's information that's growing at leaps and bounds. But we're still the same, and so when it comes to how much information gets pushed to us, we can only absorb a certain amount of information at a given time. In fact, scientifically, there's this thing at the base of our brain, at the top of our spinal column, called the reticular activating system. And the reticular, we call it the RAS, the reticular activating system will only allow 134 bits of sensory data per second to get inside your brain. And so it doesn't matter if you're exposed to a million megabits of information. Like right now, we're exposed to over a million megabits of sensory data. It doesn't matter. The brain can only process 134 bits of sensory data per second. So what is it doing? It's filtering out information. And so to your point earlier, well, that means that we can only learn so much at a time. So what we have to do is just kind of understand that process, and then sorry about that. I thought I turned the phone off.
No
And
worries.
deliver information in that way. So what we've learned is that when you're learning and adapting, you can't get everything that you need. Let's say in 1 week. Remember when you went through TAP and I went through TAP, it was what they call information by a fire hose. A lot of well-meaning intentions. So let's kind of put it in perspective. The folks over at TAP, they mean well. They want to help. They want to do their very best for us. However, we can only absorb a certain amount of information. And so, what has to happen is you have to start the process over time so you can absorb exactly what you need. Now, there's another thing that people aren't really familiar with, and it's how their mind actually works. What causes you to learn or not to learn. Well, there's this thing called the creative subconscious mind that has to have a certain piece of information or direction in order for it to work. And so when we get out, and let's say we don't have a mission or we don't quite know what we want to do, in terms of our brain and our thought process, it's looking for answers and it's looking for information and it's looking for direction. And if we don't know what it is we want to do, we get into a state of just confusion. We're scrambling around. We're not certain about anything. A lot of anxiety, stress builds up in us. And so we can go on and on and on. In fact, there are some people who are still stuck in the same place because they haven't figured out what it is they want to do next. And so the advice that we give people is look, start early, relax, and try not to do this by yourself. Because if you try to do it by yourself, you may not have all the right answers, or you may end up telling yourself some things that are not realistic versus getting some outside more, and I want to say professional help, whether it's getting a coach, a sponsor, or I'm gonna do a little pitch for Reboot, or go through the Reboot workshop. And because again, the science that we have is based on 50 years of evidence-based solutions that has been working, and the results that we've been getting from the workshop is like 98% success rate because we take it very simple. We're not trying to do anything complicated other than to help you adjust your thought process and really understand what's going on, and then focus in on the key components. And so what are the three components? I go back to the three components is you have to create a new identity, identify what it is that you want to do, your self-image. Number two, you have to find your purpose, your next mission. When you leave the military, it's essential for you to find a purpose. And then number three, obviously you need to survive and exist and pay your bills and the whole nine yards. And so find that occupation that you like, that's going to help sustain your family. Don't just take any old job. Put some thought into it. Find something that aligns with your values, and then move from there.
Very well said. And so, for Reboot, great course, great class. I just praise it. I think everyone that is in the military should go through it as they get ready for their transition. And if I remember correctly, is it open to those who've already reintegrated or started their reintegration? Do you have to be active duty to be a part of Reboot?
Oh, no, thank you for bringing that up. So, we work with everyone across the board. It doesn't matter what era, what age, um, what your status is. Even if you have a other than honorable or even a dishonorable, we'll work with you to help you rebuild your life. We call it relearn, rebuild, and rebrand. And on that note, as a result of COVID-19, we've made some, I guess you could call it adaptations, just like everyone else. At one point, we were only doing the full 3 week reverse boot camp, but COVID-19 essentially shut that down. So we took it online. So now we have an online version that either we can go 2 weeks, or we now have a what we call a 4 hour reboot your life and career seminar. So we can address or expand this to pretty much anywhere, anytime, any place to get the fundamentals in. And again, because we've been doing this for such a long time, we've figured out how to hit the highlights, and then to your point, how to provide this learning on a more distributed basis that says now we engage in what we call high touch and high tech. The high touches will start with, let's say, yes, for example, yesterday I was on the USS Midway conducting a 1 day face to face reboot your life and career seminar. But that's phase one. That's to create the awareness. And then phase two is to get you locked into the process, connected with coaches, and then begin the ongoing learning process. Because again, what we don't want to do is try to bombard you with everything at one time, because we know that people learn over time. And again, because your reticular activating system is always working all the time, you're only going to receive information that is relevant to your current needs at that particular time. And so we've now figured out how to distribute it over time, apply it to every lifestyle, and make it available to you no matter where you are.
Love it. And we talked a little bit earlier about different types of training. You have this or that training. You have just-in-time learning, and then you have
Hmm.
like solution-based learning. What
Hmm.
would you kind of put Reboot and your organization as far as the learning capabilities in, if there were three different buckets, so to speak?
So we call it generative learning.
Okay.
And generative learning is more, again, it's needs based. where you're the one that's driving the learning, you're the one that's interested in it. And so our instructors are facilitators. And so we bring up the relevant topics that are important to you, knowing that you're really only going to concentrate on the things that you want to concentrate. Plus, we also meet you where you are. And what I mean by that is we're all at some level of emotion all the time. You know, how we feel when we get up today, we may feel one way tomorrow, we may feel another way. It all depends on what's happening in our life. In fact, we call those life domains.
Mm,
So when you look at the whole person, well, yeah, there's the job, but there are your finances, there are your relationships, there's your health care. There are other factors that are driving your life. And those factors also command your attention as well. So if you're having a financial challenge and someone says, "Hey, look, you want to go play some sports?" You may say, "Look, I can't. I can only concentrate on that." But what you're concerned about the most is where you give the most energy. And if there are no relevant quick solutions, you're going to focus a whole lot on that. And so, what generative learning does, it takes that approach and it applies it to you. When we first start off the workshop, one of the first questions we ask you is, "How are you on a scale of 1 to 10? How are you doing?"
hmm,
And Derek, there's a lot of hard science behind that, but there was a study that was recently concluded by the Henry Jackson Foundation called the Veterans Metrics Initiative, TMVI. And what they did was, again, they connected with a cohort group of transitioning service members and veterans, and over time, they asked them key questions about their transition and their reintegration, and they asked them all centered around how do you feel? And they came up with a scale that, again, they found that those who had a higher number, again, on the scale of 1 to 10, felt better and were more relaxed and were more successful with their transition versus those who had a lower number. And so in the workshop that I did yesterday, that was the first question that I asked. And so I had active duty and a few veterans in the workshop. And I asked them, I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? And you know what the numbers were? And this is consistent. This has been happening for years. Usually they'll come in at a 3 or 4. That's where they are. And think about that. If you're feeling like a 3 or 4, then
it's not good.
that's what
Yeah.
life is to you. That's how you see the world, and that's how you respond to the world. And that means that nothing else is going to get through
Yeah.
until that number changes. And
Yeah.
so our endeavor is to bring that to their attention and their awareness, and then show them how to go from a 3 4 up to a 10, because fundamentally we all should be living a 10 life. Being in the
That's
military,
right.
getting out of the military, we got everything to be happy for because of all the gifts and the blessings that we got from being in the military service. We just have to take advantage of it. But again, that's part of the thought process.
I love it. And it starts off with asking questions. I'm in the real estate space, and what I've learned, you're taught, whenever you go on like a listing appointment, you have this listing packet. Mine is 57 pages deep. And you originally start out, at least I did, and you go over each page and you're just bombarding them with all this information. But really, the biggest way of making a connection and also finding out what's important to them is by asking questions. And so many people just give information, don't ask the questions that can really help where they are in that time frame. Now, we've talked a lot about overarching and how education, has changed over the years and how you're integrating that education change into what you're doing. And I love it
Mhm.
absolutely. And one thing I really want to do though is I want to ensure that people leave here with some nuggets of information that they could walk away from for those that
Mhm.
may be in their
Mhm.
transition phase or their
Mhm.
reintegration phase or something that, man, I really wish I would have done it differently last time. Let's
Mhm.
delve into the overarching theme of personal and professional growth and during and after transition. And how can veterans, and this is a question for you, how can veterans prepare themselves mentally and skill wise for a new career path, especially considering the responsibilities they may have
Mhm.
with their families that are there? And this is something that they can take away from. So, audience, write this down because Maurice is the expert and he's going to provide this for you. What do you think there, sir?
Well, thank you for that, Derek. The first thing is realize that you can't do it by yourself. Now, I know we feel like we're superhuman and we got this, but I've been in this for a while, and almost everybody, from '07s on down, always come back to, hey, I thought I knew, but I didn't. Okay. So realize that you can't do it by yourself, and get a coach, get a sponsor, connect with somebody who can help you. Because again, you need that external opinion and support. Now, for those who are currently transitioning out, I'm going to make it really easy for you. We've developed an app called the Managing Your Transition Timeline app. It's www.mytt365.online. Sign up for free. It's 100% free. And what it's going to do is going to help take the burden of tracking and managing your transition off your shoulders, and it's going to automate the process for you. It's going to give you some feedback. It's going to become your personal digital transition assistant. And it's going to communicate with you, give you some feedback, but it's going to do more. It's also going to connect you to an army of what we call community transition assistant advisors. Because again, let's go with the assumption that most of us don't know everything and don't have all the answers. And so we want to have a personal coach. So signing up on MYTT365.online, you're going to automatically be matched with a trained and skilled coach that's dived into this information, that knows all the resources, who can help you with a myriad of things. That's number one. For those who are veterans, we have a simple solution. There's what we call the Center for Military and Veteran Reintegration. So this is a new national initiative that we've been working on this for years, and it's bubbling up and it's coming to fruition. As Derek mentioned, there's transitioning out, but then there's reintegrating in. This is the first step in that process of reintegration. Again, realizing that you can't do it by yourself. Now, this is not to say that you shouldn't go down to the VA or to your county public services to get your veterans benefits prize. You should do that. But at the same time, there's that connection to the community, that's that guidance and the coaching. So for that, we have www.cmbr.us. Simple, really easy. And once you sign up, we'll put you into what we call our directory. And the directory this is kind of cool in that it's a directory of you where you sign up, and basically it's your profile of what's going on and your access to a myriad of community resources. And it doesn't matter where you are, this can work for you. And then thirdly, for those that are somewhere, let's say about a year out from transitioning, or let's say you got about a year to go, and you're getting ready to get out, we have a new initiative, and this is powerful. It's called onwardops.org.
Hmm.
Onwardops.org. And Onward Ops is an amazing program. Now, this is it's bigger than I could have imagined, in that it's a partnership between the VA, local community organizations, national organizations, where it doesn't matter what military installation you're at. You go to www.onwardops.org and you sign up for a local sponsor in your community anywhere in America. All you do is just go to the website and just sign up. And once you're in the database, the system automatically administers what we call sort of like a risk assessment, because we want to know how you're doing. But once that's done, and let's say if you're at risk and if you have some challenges, we'll marry you up or connect you to a veterans, a VA certified social worker to resolve whatever issues you have. And then there's that warm handoff to the community. And what's really happening here, Derek, on a big national scale, is we're beginning to partner up with the American Legion, the VFW, and all these local organizations, because everywhere across America, they're like 14,000 American Legion posts. And so we're working with the American Legion locally here to establish what we call Centers for Military and Veteran Integration, where you just go to when you get out, the first thing you do is just go to your local American Legion post and you check in, and we got you. That's it. You're in the system. You're not alone. You will never be alone with this process here. We're excited about that, as you can tell.
Wow, that's awesome. There you have it. I mean, I wanted one good nugget, and you gave us about 40 with some resources that they can go back to. And there are resources. You don't have to go through your transition or reintegration alone. There are so many people like Maurice, myself, and other people that are out in the community that really, really want to give back and really share what we've learned and what the community has learned. And, Maurice is in the space. He works literally, with congressional, affiliates and trying to solve this big problem. So, reach out to Maurice, reach out to Reboot, utilize those different platforms that he mentioned. And also, our audience, I just want to make sure that, Military Mutuals, our on-demand platform, is going to be a wealth of resources for professional and development growth, professional and personal professional growth, so that you can learn from it. So, as your veterans that are out there and you're going through your journey, just know that we are here to help and support you. With that being said, thank you so much, Maurice, for joining us. Wealth of knowledge. And we are going to be doing this at least once a month with Maurice on here, talking about transitions and reintegration and diving deeper into the intricacies of it so that we can help you. But until next time, stay resilient and keep growing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.